Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. Israel looking like it's going to annex Gaza. Also, in the Middle East, more rumblings of a rising Turkey. And here in the United States, shades of pre-Civil War era. Yes, and I'll explain why. Also, our guest today, Mark Sutherland, we're going to be talking about what is actually happening on the ground in England. Some troubling reports that that country actually may already be lost. Here at Patriot Radio, we deliver the news to you before everybody else so that you and your family and friends can be prepared for the times that are ahead. In fact, the times are already upon us. But you got to follow us on Telegram at patriotradio.us/Telegram for real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news aggregated across hundreds of platforms. We bring you the ground-level videos, truth, so that you can share what really is happening. With so much information noise out there today, we help cut through that. Also, we want to pray with you. So please send us a prayer request at patriotradio.us/prayer so we can walk with you in your journey with the Lord. And especially this time, there's just something feels just off here about August. And if that's resonating with you, send us a prayer request. We'd love to pray with you, but make sure you bookmark this episode, because we are very clearly headed into some very tumultuous times before the end of the year in January. But just something seems like it's going to pop here right before fall. So, with that, your wisdom from the Word, coming today from Zephaniah 2:4. In fact, most people never even read Zephaniah 2:4, but here's what it says. And actually, just to be in context, the verse prior ends with this: on the day of the Lord's anger. For Gaza will be abandoned, and Ashkelon will become a desolation. The inhabitants of Ashdod will be driven out at noon, and Ekron will be uprooted. Woe to the inhabitants of the sea coast, the nation of the Cherethites. The word of the Lord is against you, Canaan, land of the Philistines, and I will eliminate you so that there will be no inhabitant. So the seacoast will become grazing places with pastures for shepherds and folds for flocks. And the coast will be, listen to this, everyone, the coast will be for the remnant of the house of Judah. We may actually be seeing biblical prophecy fulfilled here if Israel does in fact occupy the Gaza Strip. This would be a fulfillment of this scripture, because the remnant of the house of Judah is what we know as Israel today. Now, I don't want to get into all the theological implications, etc. Watch our weekly series on Revelation if you want to get into that with us. But what I am saying is that the decision that was made today in Israel is not just a prophetic decision. It is going to have a ripple effect across the Middle East, which brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing coming to us from the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
Stocks, gold, and crypto soar as hard landing odds rise. And perhaps that's the reason people are not necessarily spending, but they are investing in some things. But interestingly, people aren't investing in gold, even though gold is rising right now. I don't know if that's because Trump is in office and people think, oh, he's going to keep everything stable. But As we've been detailing on the show, there's going to be a transition that is going to happen. And the overtures right now regarding the Federal Reserve are that the Federal Reserve is going to be, at least in its current form, completely done away with. Very likely replaced by AI, but also returning some powers back to where they belong, and that is the U.S. Treasury. So during this time and in the odds of a hard landing, of course, gold and silver are going up because that protects assets and protects wealth during times of chaos. And again, we can sense this happening. Here at Patriot Radio, you'll see the ad for it, but converttogold.com if something inside you right now is prompting you. But the next article, the CCP is inside the Fed, shocking new evidence of Chinese infiltration at America's central bank. A decade-long infiltration campaign by the Chinese Communist Party has penetrated the Federal Reserve, according to Natalie Winters, coercing employees, stealing sensitive data, and compromising America's financial core. Most Americans have heard that Chinese spies are targeting our military or hacking private companies, but there's another front. And this is part of the unrestricted warfare model of the Chinese, that every single aspect of our lives becomes a battlefield. 2022 Senate investigation offered a rare glimpse into this operation, but even that barely scratches the surface. This is a war without bullets. Number one, and this is interesting, these are documented examples that have received little attention from the mainstream media. Detained and surveilled in China. 2019, a Fed employee was detained 4 separate times by Chinese authorities during a visit to Shanghai. He was threatened and told his family would be harmed and coerced into handing over sensitive U.S. economic data. Chinese agents then accessed his Fed laptop phones and internal contact lists. He was ordered to tell a good story about China back in the United States. Secret data transfers to Chinese institutions, coordination with Chinese propaganda outlets, suspicious talent recruitment programs. And then a named case, the Justice Department indicted John Harold Rogers, a former senior advisor to the Federal Reserve's Division of International Finance, for allegedly passing sensitive U.S. economic data to agents tied to the Chinese government. It's time to end the Federal Reserve. And I think that these kind of articles are going to help do it, because the Federal Reserve is it is not even federal. It's not even a reserve. It's a private corporation given a charter by Congress that has become an Achilles heel of the U.S. economy. And I've heard all these people out there defending the Federal Reserve System as if somehow there weren't going to be the big boom and bust cycles that there were prior to its existence. But actually, they're worse than they were prior to its existence. And the stabilization of currency can be realized today by backing it with commodities and gold and silver. So there is a way forward, and this power was originally supposed to lie in the hands of the U.S. Treasury, not in a private corporation. In fact, you can read about how Andrew Jackson came against the Federal Reserve. And this issue of bankers controlling everything, people are going to be stunned when they realize that most of the U.S. debt we actually owe to ourselves. In other words, we owe it to the Federal Reserve, which is a creation of the people. So we could do away with some of the U.S. debt, yes, and I believe that is part of Donald Trump's plan to say you've made a bad investment. Now, Ron Paul actually brought this up when he was running for president, and very few people paid attention. But today, I think people are starting to listen and wake up. That brings us now to the China front. The Philippines and India conduct their first joint naval patrols in the South China Sea. This is huge. Chinese military also sailed its warships to the contested waters. They wrapped up a 2-day patrol with Indian forces, which is a huge step forward. And the first time in history, we had a joint sail with the Indian Navy. This is a very clear overture that India would be on the side of the Philippines and obviously the United States if China attempts to invade Taiwan. China tightens its grip on Western defense firms by limiting mineral exports. And according to the Wall Street Journal, China is ramping up pressure on Western defense companies by restricting the export of these key minerals. China accounts for about 90% of global rare earth metal supplies and leads in the production of many other critical minerals. What's not being said here is the United States used to own that position, and we can again. We're going to need to retool our manufacturing. This is an important point for everybody out there. It's going to take time for this to happen. Right now, especially logistics companies, trucking companies are suffering because of this transition. But when the U.S. manufacturing sector comes back and the mining sector comes back, there's going to be more than enough prosperity to go around. And also, just with the tariffs right now, the amount of tariff revenue coming in very likely would offset an income tax. In other words, it would give Trump the ability to eliminate the income tax for earners or for anyone that earns under $150,000 a year. China and Russia also opened joint naval drills in the Sea of Japan, the latest sign of their strengthening alliance at both tactical and strategic levels. Following the 3 days of exercises, the countries then plan to carry out patrols in parts of the Pacific together. And that area of the world just getting more and more tense. China's economy is trapped in a doom loop it can't escape. China's leadership, including Xi Jinping, is now openly admitting to a crisis of industrial overcapacity, a problem they have termed involution. This counterproductive and disorderly competition is causing destructive price wars, particularly in the massive automotive industry. Also, Beijing is attempting to use dictatorial measures like price controls to fix the issue, which experts argue is going to fail. With weak domestic consumption and export markets closing due to tariff wars, China's only path to achieving its growth targets is more investment in manufacturing, a move that only worsens the overcapacity problem in a dangerous doom loop. This is what we've been talking about on the show for a long time. China is being deprived of the economic ability to wage war and also the fuel to do it. So the strategy is going to be borne out one of two ways. China either invades early Taiwan, or it has to wait a generation, which some of its senior leadership, at least to save face, probably won't do. Also, national security threat, according to Rare Foundation USA, Democrat Gene Wu is enabling China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea to seize Texas land while intimidating Texans who resist. There's a whole article about this. This just highlights the issue of Americans internally who weren't born here, but who have ties to some of our foreign adversaries and are doing everything that someone who is averse to the United States would do. And so this should bring up, I think, a huge investigation, but it should bring up questions everywhere in the United States, wherever you're listening to Patriot Radio today. What are your local county commissioners doing? Are they supporting Chinese land grabs in your area? Are your city councils? Are your state legislators? Who all is involved in this? It's going to take our voices to bring this to the surface and to hold people to account, especially at the ballot box. President Trump also declared he will significantly increase tariffs on India in response to their substantial purchases of Russian oil. They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. India is starting to back off now, buying Russian oil, but it means they need to find another country to purchase from. Well, I wonder if that's going to be the United States of America. When we come back from the break, more from the Middle East front and shades of the pre-Civil War era in Texas.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with the Middle East front. Turkey rising in the Caucasus. Turkey has backed Azerbaijan's stunning win over Armenia. It's building the Zang-Izur corridor to link with Central Asia, which was traditionally Turkic-speaking peoples, by the way. It's bypassing Russia, and it's building a new Turkic bloc across the Caspian Sea. Also, with Assad gone, Iran's proxies broken, and Turkey's proxies running Damascus, Turkey's trying to make peace with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And I got to tell you, this looks like a return of the Ottoman Empire. And with the overtures of Recep Erdogan making open statements, like turning the Hagia Sophia from a museum back into a mosque, which is the only place a caliph can be ordained, and also having Muslim brothers recognize him as the only one eligible to be a caliph. Well, this might actually happen in the near term. Bookmark this episode as well. Rod D. Martin is the one that had that analysis. The Central Bank of the UAE has issued its financial stability report, which includes a comprehensive assessment of financial system stability and developments. Report affirmed the robustness of the UAE banking sector, and you're going to see that continue to grow, especially as they get closer to Israel. Also, Saudi Arabia's economy has demonstrated strong resilience to external shocks, with the non-oil sector expanding, inflation remaining contained, and unemployment reaching record lows. So you are seeing Saudi Arabia become a winner in the Trump era, along with the UAE. Also, interestingly, a former Al Jazeera journalist who had close relations with none other than Osama bin Laden has been appointed advisor to the transitional president of Syria. I don't know how much more jihadi it can get or how much more open, but there you go. A new survey shows major support in Iran for the demand made by the leader of the failed 2009 Green Revolution, who is pushing to hold a national referendum on convening a constituent assembly to draft a new Iranian constitution. 62% of Iranians support Mousavi's demand, who's been in house arrest since the failed revolution in 2009. Interesting, this might be the first tangible moves toward regime change in Iran from within. Political analysis in the Arab press highlight that the Lebanese cabinet session scheduled for Tuesday is attracting international and regional attention amid presidential insistence on establishing an executive mechanism to ensure the state's control over weapons. So it looks like Lebanon is coming into the fold and seeking peace. Problem is, Hezbollah does not want to do that. And neither do some Christian militias who are concerned of what will happen if they disarm like last time. Interesting to see what will happen here in the next week in Lebanon, and we will keep our eyes on it and keep you informed. Also, a bread crisis deepens in Sueda as private bakeries shut down amid fuel and flour shortages. That's happening due to the effective siege that is occurring in that area of Syria. And again, they are pleading with the Israelis to annex them. But it seems like the Israelis will only be annexing one thing at a time, at least into the near future. Also, a senior official in Netanyahu's office reportedly said, quote, "The decision has been made. We are going to occupy Gaza. If confirmed, this marks a strategic turning point with major geopolitical consequences. A permanent presence would mean long-term troop deployment, daily security risks, and likely insurgency warfare." I think they're actually going to try to get most of them out of Gaza and settle it with Israelis. This is a very high-risk strategy, and Hamas responded predictably to that news. Israeli threats are repetitive and are of no value or influence us on our decisions. And clearly, Hamas does not seek peace. The United States has come to the conclusion that Hamas does not want to seek peace, which is giving the green light to Israel to go in. Also, Israeli media is reporting that the military's chief of staff may resign if a full occupation of Gaza is implemented. I don't understand why, other than the internal politics of Israel sometimes is worse than the United States. Also, Turkey is advancing ties with Poland to shape a post-war Ukraine. Again, Turkey on the rise. It launched the Balkans Peace Platform, hosting 6 Balkan states in Istanbul. If those initiatives pay off, it could become the southern anchor of a new intermarium. In other words, the southern anchor of a new bloc. Very, very fascinating what is happening there with Turkey. And that brings us now to the Russia front. The Trump-Medvedev spat leads to nuclear rhetoric. President Donald Trump said he has ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be repositioned after nuclear rhetoric from Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev. Look, Medvedev is the guy who's designated to put out the inflammatory comments and the inflammatory rhetoric so that Putin looks reasonable. That's how they do this, okay? Nothing's really going to come out of this. President Trump didn't even say what nuclear submarines he's talking about, like nuclear armed or like nuclear powered. Nobody knows, but I suspect that was intentional. But the fact is, Trump is just saying and doing publicly what leadership in America hasn't done for a while, and that is stand up to bullies. So that's what you're seeing here in just this war of words, so don't let it be overplayed. A video of migrants fighting with sticks and knives in front of a kebab shop in Newport, Wales is going viral in the UK. The video is seen as evidence of how weapons of brutal violence is spread in larger cities and now often seen in small towns that used to be spared. We're going to talk with our guest today, Mark Sutherland, about what is actually happening in the United Kingdom, because it really is getting out of control. Meanwhile, Tommy Robinson is arrested at Luton Airport over an alleged assault at St. Pancras Station in London last week. So, assaults on one hand, and the guy's calling it out, get arrested on the other. Seems like there is an inverted justice going on in the United Kingdom. Also, very interestingly, after this huge earthquake, this one of the largest on record off of Russia, Kamchatka to be specific, the Sopka volcano has reached 3 kilometers in height or in length, the stream of lava coming off of it, and it's actually nearing the Bogdanovich Glacier, which is rapidly melting. In other words, the Bogdanovich Glacier is on fire. Come on, somebody. The eruption began on July 30th following that earthquake, but it is giving a lot of experts serious pause right now because a swarm of quakes was under Mount Rainier last week, and there has been a lot of activity under Cascadia recently. And could this be a precursor of what's going to happen here on the West Coast? No fear, but a legitimate concern if it happened on the other side of the Pacific. It could happen here because it has happened here in the past. And that brings us to the national front. Not to be outdone, a massive, mysterious, hot blob is beneath the eastern United States, moving toward New York, puzzling scientists. I'm not sure how they know it's a big hot blob that's 220 miles long, what the blob is made of exactly. But hot blobs on the East Coast. Let you all figure out what that means. Texas House Democrats have refused to return to Texas by Governor Greg Abbott's 3 p.m. deadline. Now, interestingly, the 1960s and 70s saw troubles in Ireland that began with the Protestant gerrymandering of districts. Now, this isn't to say that there doesn't need to be redistricting. There does, absolutely 100%. Because of non-citizens being counted, Democrats have a much larger proportion than they should. So, in other words, they would lose seats with these redistricting efforts in places like Texas. They're planning a press conference, which is going on shortly. But the point of this is that this is the kind of thing that happened prior to the Civil War, where there was political brinksmanship, particularly by, guess who? The Democrats, even back then. And Governor Abbott looks like he's going to call their bluff. In fact, the Texas House just passed a motion to issue arrest warrants for Democrat lawmakers who fled the state. So in addition to the governor vacating seats, potentially, now a judge has to rule on that, whether the seats have in fact been abandoned, or those Democrat lawmakers being arrested because there's been what's called a call of the House, and they have not showed up intentionally to break a quorum so that it can't be voted on, this redistricting measure. All of this is leading to unrest between states. because those Democrat lawmakers went to places like New York, and their governor is actually saying they're going to do redistricting. California is also saying it. So you're going to see a war between red and blue states on redistricting. But it really does need to happen, because what we're learning is there were huge proportions of people, again, that were counted as citizens for the purpose of apportionment for congressional districts that shouldn't have been. And so the redistricting effort does need to happen. It's not gerrymandering. But this is the kind of thing that we analyze that could lead to significant unrest inside the United States. This is a key marker here. This is a key marker. So we're going to watch this very, very closely over the next few days. Also, President Trump was right. The BLS commissioner inflated jobs numbers to benefit Biden and Harris, according to an article by the Gateway Pundit. He is set, President Trump, to appoint a new commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics soon. Yeah, we need some accurate economic numbers and enough of the messing around. Trump administration has announced that states and cities which boycott Israeli-owned and based companies will be denied federal aid and disaster relief with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. This funding includes roughly $1.9 billion in federal grants the states rely on to cover search and rescue equipment, emergency manager salaries, and backup power systems in the case of major natural disasters. Additionally, FEMA has stated it will require major cities to agree to the Israel policy to receive a cut of $553.5 million set aside to prevent terrorism in dense areas such as New York City. So it looks again like Trump is calling the bluffs of the communist areas of the United States. Interesting. This is, again, another marker of where potential civil unrest can happen, because money is being deprived that was dependent on. So just, regardless of where you stand maybe on those issues, these are markers. And we need to pay close attention to this and see what the reactions are. Because a lot of the attempt to foment civil unrest and Democrats getting upset and protesting all over the United States really has fizzled out. It's going to be interesting to see this. Let's keep our eyes right there. Our eyes are always on God, obviously, but we need to focus on some of these things, because these are key markers for your friends and family. All right, the State Department is launching a pilot program where travelers entering the United States on tourism and business visas pay a hefty bond as a guarantee they will not stay in the United States. I think there's going to be a significant amount of pushback against that, because a lot of people rely on coming into the United States just on these two types of visas. And I think that'll have a serious impact on tourism. So we'll see what happens there. RFK Jr. says he will ban organ harvesting from patients who still show signs of life. Amen. The ghoulish practice of keeping people alive to harvest organs, or harvesting organs while they're still alive, ending under the Trump administration. And lastly, hundreds of people packed Pursuit Seattle Sunday evening to remember the life of a young man murdered in a drive-by shooting. Investigators say they have no leads or suspects in the case. And I heard recently that Pursuit put up a reward. When we come back from the break, our guest, Mark Sutherland. What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today. And our guest today is Mark Sutherland. He's a writer, producer, and filmmaker, marksutherland.org, and the voice that we go to hear what's really happening in the United Kingdom. Mark, it's great to have you back on Patriot Radio.
Matt, it's good to be with you, and thank you for that kind compliment. I will try and live up to it, to say, ask any question you want, my friend, far away.
Well, let's start with maybe the most controversial, and that is, and it shouldn't be, but there's jihadi attacks happening all over Europe, in the United Kingdom. I mean, you're 3 or 4 a week that are reported. And then you had this recent attack on a Garda in Ireland, in Dublin, knife attack. Very clearly looks like he's chanting something in Arabic. They're removing it from YouTube almost immediately, which kind of tells me what it probably is. What are you seeing on the ground in England right now, and what's the warning to America?
There are so many alarms going off, my friend. The number one of the big things in London is knife crime is off the roof, is off the charts. That's the first thing to say. But also, we have just had a bill that's come through in regard to child protection bill in regard to what they can see on the internet. Now, what's happened is that started to exclude adults. It's suddenly become rather controlling in regard to, as I say, what you can then show on the internet. Free speech is so much under attack and is gaining. And so much so, and you might be shocked at this, I know I shared it with earlier, that Jim Jordan and two congressmen were over in the UK today. They must have landed yesterday. And I've just caught the end of someone commenting on this independently, brilliantly, to say that they had been on GB News. And they're over here because they're concerned about free speech in the UK. And they're also concerned about because they do not want the draconian measures that we are beginning to be under then coming to America. So here we are, having just had President Trump, President 47, Trump, go to Turnberry, which is where one of his golf courses is. Then he has then gone to Aberdeen on the opening of another new golf course. And there he is with Keir, or as we might say, Herr Starmer, having a conversation at Turnberry, talking about free speech, and Starmer going, oh, well, yes, we've always had free speech. We're going to defend it. Well, that's very questionable at the moment. And also President Trump describing the mayor of London as a very nasty man. Starmer going, well, he's my friend. So it was rather amusing, but Trump was giving him a lesson in how to win elections. Why am I saying this? Because free speech is under attack in this country. The whole thing of net zero, solar panels everywhere, windmills everywhere. President Trump even addressed the windmills, saying they're wrecking your landscape and your view. Remember, you're more than aware of this, and of course, he has come to Scotland, where his mother was born, and has got strong family links here. So people have been arrested. We have what's called non-hate crimes, where people who have said tweets, who have expressed an opinion on any of the social media platforms, and some people, they may have been reported to the police saying this is unacceptable language, and then they go and knock on the door. Sorry to go back in time a year ago, but this is really, really important. So a mother of one, Lucy Connolly, after the Southport riots and other riots that were going on, she expressed frustration in a tweet. She then, in a very short space of time, took that tweet down. She sadly, one of her children, she did have two children, and very sadly, another child died in hospital under circumstances that were very upsetting to her and her husband. Anyway, with all the Southport attack by Axel Rutagabana on young children at a Taylor Swift dance class, where he was hacking and injuring a number of children, killing them, and all the fallout of that, and Lucy Connolly ends up going and being put in jail for a 31-month sentence for putting a tweet. And we now have a situation where judges are not putting away Afghan people that have come over here from Afghanistan, and their behavior is so inappropriate that it's along the lines of paedophile, and they're not being put in jail or they're being given a suspended sentence, or they're not being kicked out of the country. We have just, because of our involvement in Afghanistan in the last week, it has just come up that we have brought into the country a minimum of 16,000, maybe more, some people say up to 26,000 people from Afghanistan who said that these people, there was a data leak revealing addresses to Taliban, etc. And these people were then, their lives were under threat. And anyone that worked to help the British forces, suddenly it's amounted to 16,000, maybe up to 26,000. I didn't know we had that many interpreters. Maybe you could, in your own experience, could give a little bit of insight into that. And now we have these people here. And Matt, with your experience as well, there will be no doubt that within this country, we will have evil actors that wish to not do some very nice, that will do some pretty evil things to our nation. There has also been another figure that MI6 say, so MI5 work abroad, MI6 work internally, or our own security spy agencies are following up to 40,000 people. We don't have the resources to do this. We're pretty bankrupt. And then we've got the small boats that are coming in every single day. I think as we speak, even today, I think there might have been 600, 900 yesterday. They are coming over by the thousands. They are not stopping. Macron, that excuse of a French president, was over here. He was given a big state visit, much to a number of people's annoyance. And there he is calling it irregular migration, like King Charles is now calling it irregular migration. And just finally, as you will see, we now have protests on the ground outside hotels that these illegal immigrants have been put in up and down the country. That has happened, majorly focusing on Epping in Essex, where mums, aunts, grandmothers have led this in regard to a hotel called the Bell Hotel, which is next door to a school, which at first had more families in, now has single men in there of fighting age. And they have said this is inappropriate to put these people there. But we now have in Essex, in Norfolk, I know it's a bit of a geography lesson, and a few other places elsewhere where the public are coming on the streets and saying no more. If you ask me, why won't this stop? I don't think they have any intention of stopping this whatsoever. You had an open border for 4 years under the Biden auto pen administration, and the minimum of 11 million have come over the border, or people like dear JJ Cowell reckons it could even be up to, 30, 40, 50 million, which sounds unbelievable, but you are a huge continent. But it was just, all the people trafficking. So they're not doing anything about it. If you want to stop it, there is quite a simple way to do it. But we are heading for complete bankruptcy as a nation. There is no around the cabinet is a bunch of left-wing ideologues. They do not know how to run a country. They do not know how to put the economic basis of this country on a good level at all. It's all ideology, and we are in deep and utter serious doo-doo, to say the least. And then suddenly, the Prime Minister announces that he wants to go for a two-state solution and recognize a state of a people group that doesn't even exist, except in modern terms, the tryout of the two-state solution is what you and I would call Gaza. and look at how that is actually playing out and working out. So in summary, Matt, that's what's happening on this side of the pond.
So that brings up the question regarding Hairstormer trying to recognize a Palestinian state, and as Trump said, really rewarding Hamas. Yeah. But it was following the heels of France. Now Canada has followed on the heels of the UK. Why would you do that right now? That doesn't make any sense, especially when they're trying to negotiate an end to the conflict, and this really emboldens Hamas.
Well, let's widen this out, and let's widen it out in spiritual terms, my friend. We're not fighting flesh and blood, but principalities and powers, and that principality and power is within a left-wing ideology of Fabianism, socialism, communism, Marxism. When you then, I think in September 2023, fly out to Canada to have a meeting with Justin Trudeau, to then meet with Jacinda Ardern, to then meet with, I'm not sure if Mark Carney was out there at the time, or even Tony Blair, but you are then having a champagne socialist loving. That's what you are doing. Now, I didn't vote for the party that then, on the one hand, seemed to have many members of parliament within this nation, but a lot of those members of parliament on the Labour side have only just got in by 200 votes, 300 votes. Just give the majority in many ways is slim. So he has done that. Carney is going to pile in. France is, of course, is pile in. Then let's not forget Albanese and his sidekick Penny Wong in Australia. They are doing exactly the same because they are all ideological socialist. Albanese for many years has been a pro-Palestine marches. You people can look that up. The other thing is just a little tidbit here. Jacinda Ardern in 2007, I just discovered used to worked in the Blair administration in this country. I'll just throw that out. So look at the relationships of how people are connected. When you fly to Brazil and you meet Lula, and that administration has just put an ankle bracelet on Bolsonaro, that will tell you the situation we're in. So why now? I believe it's because of internal politics. He has spent more time out of the country, flying around trying to be some big statesman, than actually dealing with the problems that this country has, right, and to fix them. So it's an ideology within their manifesto. Supposedly people have said, oh, we'd go for a two-state solution and recognize a Palestinian state. Well, as an international lawyer whose Attorney General, Harmer, or Hermer is his name, but we call him Harmer, who again is another left-wing ideologue of an international lawyer. This is their mindset. So this is what we are dealing with, which is a big shock to quite a lot of the British people of how bad they are. So they are internationalists. That is their viewpoint. So he just believes that through the law, he can then sort this out and go for a two-state solution number 3. And then what he is not telling people, as you and I, we are connoisseurs of history, we work on this, 4 times the people group that would then say they're Palestinian. I'm not being sarcastic. They are Arabs. There is already a two-state solution. It's called Jordan, where Churchill created Transjordan, gave 78% of the land away to create Transjordan that was promised to the Jewish people as their homeland. They were then left with 22%. So there is a homeland. But the thing is, Jordan, which it became Jordan from Transjordan, the last thing they want is any Palestinians then, as we address them like that, into Jordan because of the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is written all over the documents of Hamas. So our Prime Minister has just, where the BBC wouldn't call Hamas a terrorist group, or they say a prescribed terrorist group, Our prime minister has now recognized a terrorist group. Also, to then force the issue over what PLO then call the West Bank, you and I would call Judea and Samaria. And there is a clue here, Judah, which is the Jews, which is their homeland, which is Jesus is a Jew and not a Palestinian. So they are rewriting immediate history. They are then wishing to ignore international law and the whole idea. They will not say this, but the extreme of this is to literally bring about from the river to the sea cults, wishes, and wipe out Israel. And really, as Hamas said, if you back Hamas in this way, who have now turned around and thanked Mr. Starmer, you are then condoning the actions of a group of people that wish to ethnically cleanse the world of the last drop of blood of the Jewish people. And if people think I'm exaggerating, then what they need to do is to look to Iran and the fact that Hamas is one of their proxies in this fire ring of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and then Iran themselves. So this is what we are dealing with. And the reason why he's recognized that, as Macron is because I believe of pressures from home. We now have 5 members of parliament who have been elected to be members of parliament because they are called the Gaza MPs. They are only in there for one issue, because of Gaza.
When we come back from the break, more with Mark Sutherland. He's going to be talking with us about his trip to Israel, how it changed his life, and I hope it changes yours.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with our guest, Mark Sutherland, marksutherland.org. He is a writer, filmmaker, and producer. Mark, you mentioned that you had traveled to Israel, that it changed your life in May. I'd like you to share that because there's a lot of anti-Israel sentiment coming from the right, and specifically by a lot of people that have never actually been there. As you know, I've traveled all over the world, and it's something totally different. When you go on the ground, you see the sights, you smell the way the third world is, or the second world, or the first world, and the people that you interact with gives you a really good sense for what's really going on. So please share your story.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you that you have traveled the world and that you do have a passport that allows you to do that as an American citizen, because not many people do. And thank you for doing that from your side of the pond. I know also thank you for your service, because that's one of the ways you've also done that as well. It gives you a certain perspective that I think is incredibly unique. And I've had the privilege to travel to many, many countries, and I have been to the third world and the second world. And I'll just say this, having been in Poland in 1986, I've also been to Africa, to Tanzania. I've also traveled to Peru and South America and other places. So I then had the opportunity to go with a couple of dear friends of mine and 2 others to Israel. Thank you for saying that. Yes, it did change my life, because when we're reading the scripture, and I know it sounds a bit cliche, but things start to come alive when you go to where they're saying, look, this is the rock that Moses touched, the second rock. This is at Mount Nebo. This is where he is then buried. And you start to think, right, you've gone into the wilderness for 40 years. You could have taken the straight route and got there in 3 weeks. And you're going round and round this desert. And yet there it is in front of you. And it gives you a total and utter different insight to then go to the Dead Sea, to go to Galilee, to then go into Jerusalem and go, wow. You know, this really for me on a personal level really hit me. But also on another level, when you're going into Jerusalem and a friend of yours in the States says, "Where are you?" I mean, I'm just coming into Jerusalem. And he said, "Could you do me a favor? Could you find this plaque that I helped to put on the wall about, sadly, a terrorist incident in 1975? He was fine. Other people sadly died. But he, very much had PTSD from that. Why am I saying that? What I'm saying is that these things start to become alive when you've seen things in the news. And Israel is an absolutely fascinating place. And it is fascinating because of history. It's also being someone who, we're immersed in politics or trying to work out how people think. Until you go to Israel, you do not understand, or you begin to work at understanding what's happening politically. And then you see how that's reflected and reported in the West. You see the challenges within the country itself. And you sit down with people, as I one 3-hour conversation that meant a lot to me with the journalist over there, and is explaining things. And there you are seeing protests against, Bibi Netanyahu, release the hostages now, etc., etc. And you are getting your head around it. You're immersed in it. So you are seeing historically, you're going on the Mount of Olives. As it says in Zechariah 12-14, makes it very clear. This is where Jesus is returning to. And all that is going to play out from that, no matter how many bricks you brick up the Eastern Gate, thinking he's not going to be able to walk through that. So you see this with your own eyes, and that helps you to understand, Matt, where we are at now. And I don't sit here as some clever sort of Bible prophecy expert or biblical expert, but I know what the Bible says. I know how the book ends. And we are going, I believe, in that direction very fast, which is difficult for some people to get their head around. So to see all of that, to understand that when Bibi Netanyahu won the election a few years ago, before I think 22, then turning around and saying, right, I now need to have judicial reforms. The fact that judiciary and the Supreme Court started fighting him over that. And here's the parallel, because the parallel with what Trump has been through over the last 4 years with lawfare, the parallels of how judges are beginning and law behaving over here and also in Israel. So then they're turning around and going, no, we don't want this judicial change. We like the power that we've had for a long time. And then there were all the protests. And as Hamas has stated, they thought that Israel was starting to beat itself up from the inside. Then they took the opportunity on the 7th of October, 2023. People up to that point, young IDF female soldiers, looking at screens, warning people higher up the chain. This is what's going on. We see what Hamas is doing on the border on the other side of the fence, and then being told, no, then it's fine. Just ignore it. It's fine. Well, respectfully, we then look at what happened on the 7th of October and 1,200 people being murdered and many injured. But a heck of a lot of bravery that happened that day and over the 2-3 days in all to fight back. Why am I saying that? Unless you are there and immersed in it, you don't have an understanding of it whatsoever. When people are singing from the river to the sea, and at its widest point, it's only 85 miles wide.
Right.
It gives you a concept of, my goodness me, this place is very, very small. It takes, a number. It is still a long journey from the north to the south, but you can do that. You do that in a day easily. Then you get an idea of the the fact that you've had a rocket launch pad in Gaza, firing rockets as soon as Hamas came in 2007. You start to get your head around the fact that when Ariel Sharon said, "I'm pulling out," I mean, personally, it's very easy to say in hindsight, but that was not a good decision. But understanding all the politics, and getting yourself involved in the history, and then understanding when people like, let's say it, the Candace Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene, we have to call these people out, turning around and saying, well, why are we giving weapons? Why are we supporting them? AIPAC influences, American administration too much, blah, blah, blah. And the fact that any money that is spent militarily is actually spent within the military industrial complex inside American border itself. The other payoff is that Israel is, test technology as well. So changed my life biblically because it just gave you a different viewpoint, Matt, by being boots on the ground.
And I think it's so important to have boots on the ground. Mark Sutherland, thank you for sharing the story, joining me on Patriot Radio today. As always, my friend, blessings to you. Keep up the fight there. In England, we're fighting here in America, and I think it's going to take all of us to ensure Western civilization survives for our children and grandchildren. God bless you.
And you. Thanks, Matt.
So what can you do? Well, check out marksutherland.org, but also share this with your friends and family about the idea of actually going and being on the ground in a place and understanding that there are forces at work that are seeking the destruction of the United States and Israel right now that we shouldn't be siding with. And it has been very clear in the scripture that we shouldn't be siding with them because this is the greatest harvest in the history of the world, but there's also an accompanying great apostasy. And along with that, a great awakening. Which side are you on? That's the question for today. God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. So keep up the fight.